Hey everyone, welcome to Sociastrology. Today we are going to look at the year 2025 on a personal level. We're going to look at this from the context of your rising or sun signs to see how this year is going to play out for you personally. So we're going to go through the major transits for the year to decipher the most important factors for you. So we're going to look at Pluto in Aquarius, which has just permanently moved in November, and look at how that's going to play into the fact that Neptune, Uranus, and Saturn are all changing signs this year. So they're going to be in different houses in your chart than they have been for ages. And then we also will look at Jupiter and its ingress into Cancer to look at where that benefit and luck, goodwill is coming through for you next year. And we will also look at this big epic Mars retrograde process that we have just started going through and will be playing out for the whole first half of the year. And then we will look at the nodal axis and its sign change into Pisces and Virgo to see how the eclipses are likely to play out for you, with eclipses in Pisces, Virgo, and Aries within the context of your own personal chart. So this should play out. This should work perfectly for your rising sign. It could probably also hold for your sun sign as well, but also for a detailed description of what to expect in the coming year, do feel free to book a personal reading. What I do is I look at your natal chart, I go deeply into all of that, but then I use a lot of different timing techniques to see which eclipses are most likely to play out in a very poignant way for people. Whether or not their zodiacal releasing indicates that certain alignments are likely to play out and manifest in a specific way or not, and all of the transits to your own personal planets and so forth. So to really dig into this, I definitely recommend a personal reading, but this should hold really perfectly for your rising sign, and it will probably also apply for your sun sign as well. Additionally, for a mundane astrology general overview of the coming year, politically, historically, socially, I just published last week a really epically long video about that. So if you have the time and you are interested in how this year is also likely to play out on the world stage, I recommend checking that out too. And other than that, if you are new here, do please consider subscribing for future videos. I do topics like this, so the mundane astrology on the one hand, and then I tend to look at the exact same alignment or time frames from a personal standpoint and take it through all of the signs. So if that's something that is of interest to you, then do please feel free to subscribe. I would love to have you here for future videos. And if you don't mind hitting the thumbs up button, I would greatly appreciate that. It helps the video to spread around. It helps the channel to grow. So I am deeply, deeply grateful for all of that. And without any further ado, let's get into your reading. For Leo, we have Pluto is in your seventh house of relationships, partnerships, other people, legal matters. And we have Saturn and Neptune will be moving into your ninth house of your worldview, philosophy, higher learning, travel, religion, spirituality, publishing, things along these lines. And we have Uranus is moving into your 11th house of hopes and dreams, associates, affiliates, friends, allies, those who support your public standing, your career, your reputation. So off the bat, we see that you have Pluto, which is very transformative. It is deeply regenerative. It can create a huge amount of change and also offers a lot of influence both from you and toward you as well as Uranus in the 11th, which is very change oriented. It is liberatory. It can cause some upheaval. It causes a lot of fascination as well. But ultimately, it is an instigator of great change. So we see a huge amount of changes within the context of your relationship. So, friends, allies, colleagues, the organizations and groups that you're involved with, as well as your romantic partners and other people in general. So these areas of your life, this basically overall area of your life is undergoing a huge amount of change right now. And so you are very, very likely going to see some people leaving your life because you have outgrown them, or rather, I should say, in a kinder way, you have grown in different directions. But additionally, new people coming in. And what's interesting is I think that these people are more aligned with where you're at now, but with Pluto indicating also a deepening of your closest relationships, these are probably people that you just feel like you resonate with very, very, very deeply. Now, one thing that I do want to mention along those lines is Pluto can also indicate power dynamics and the balance of power within a relationship. So this is something that you're going to want to just watch for. Make sure you're not being manipulated, make sure you're paying attention to red flags, because I'll just give you one like worst case scenario. So for instance, if you were to get really deeply involved with someone who is manipulative and twists things, and you decided to step out of that situation, we also have that big change with regard to your friends and your colleagues and that which supports your public standing. So if they were then to get upset, they could try to drive a wedge between you and friends, or they could try to negatively impact your reputation, things like this. Now, this is only one very specific type of situation, but I do want to throw it out there. These are going to be very close to trine with each other for a long time. So it does offer the partner and the power that the partner has a huge amount of access also to your friends and to the other people around you. So I do just want to throw that out there. It's not the most likely thing, but I like to give cautions where I see them. So what's nice though about Uranus in the 11th house is that typically this house goes over quite well. Again, it is our hopes and dreams and that which supports our career. So you could get some surprising help in your career. Now, on the other hand, you could also have within the context of the people that are signified by this house, allies, colleagues, people that you're in groups with, the groups themselves, friends, they could change a lot. They could have some really shocking events happen with them. And so that may be something that you wind up having to deal with in different scenarios in the coming 7 years or so that Uranus will ultimately be in this house. But you could also find that on a personal level, you have a new hope, a new dream, a new ideal to reach for that has entered your perspective. It's something that is fascinating to you. It may be something that you have recently encountered, or even a possibility or a fascination that has arisen for you. And sorry, I just realized I didn't have my cursor on over here. So we have Uranus here, of course, Pluto, and Saturn and Neptune. But as I was saying, so Uranus here can bring, again, a new fascination. It may even be some kind of role that is new. It could be a field that's new, even. So there's something that is fascinating you, that's really catching your attention, specifically in terms of something you really want for yourself. And this could come in a pretty surprising way for you. And you could, again, like this surprising help in your career, things could fall into place in really interesting and surprising ways within the context of your career as well. And you can definitely utilize your influence over people, the fact that you are coming off as formidable or pretty powerful yourself. to underpin finessing a situation in order to achieve a hope and a goal and a dream. Having that there, Pluto in your seventh house, that's something that you'll want to keep in mind. You're going to have this one here for 20 years. So it is a double-edged sword. Of course, you got to watch out for the power that other people have over you, but do understand that you are coming across as very strong as well. Now, when it comes to Saturn and Neptune, these are interestingly different archetypes. They are very different. There's not a lot of overlap, but I will point out where they do come together. So with Saturn, what we're dealing with is a kind of reservedness. It can be drawn back. It can be very stoic, very serious minded, very focused, willing to put in a huge amount of effort, and really being required to put in a huge amount of effort with that as well. This can also be coming across as very authoritative, or dealing with authority figures as well. Now, with Neptune, very different archetype, we have this kind of idealization, this romanticization, this wouldn't it be nice, dreaming things up, thinking big, looking at the big picture. Now, this can also be a little confusing as an energy. This can even lead to some delusions, even some deceptions that can arise. But more often than not, it's just this kind of compassionate, idealized, big picture thinking orientation to Neptune. Now, when Neptune and Saturn come together, what they do share in common is a sense of sacrifice for the greater good, or for something that is perceived as bigger than oneself. It can also indicate a strong amount of knowledge and wisdom that's bound up with that. And one thing with Neptune in the ninth house, with the ninth house having to do with culture and foreign things and travel and matters like this, Neptune also has to do with the global, the world at large, the whole world. And Saturn is also very worldly. It is the mundane world that we are physically encountering and dealing with. Neptune takes a bit of the bigger view of that in terms of all of the humanity and all of their beliefs and all of their cultures and so on and so forth. So you could definitely find yourself traveling or digging deeply into different cultures, different worldviews, things like this. And additionally, this can have you becoming kind of like a spiritual sage and building up a lot of spiritual wisdom with both Saturn and Neptune in that ninth house as well. This also helps with persistent effort toward your studies and being willing to put in that good work. And what's nice about that is that Saturn does tend to reward that. If you put in good, clean effort, it tends to be like, all right, you've earned this reward. Go for it, you know? And with Neptune, it's going to want to reward you. The issue with Neptune is that it doesn't lead by tangible evidence. Saturn does. Saturn will reward you in a very tangible, real way for tangible, real effort. With Neptune, it's more about trying to stay in alignment. So it's a feeling. It will give you an urge to do something. It will present you with an opportunity for something where you may not recognize off the bat what the value of that would be to you, but it's likely to be of immense value and a lasting impression upon your life. So I would keep your eyes open for opportunities, both tangible and in terms of an intuition and a feeling there. Now, this can also actually have you putting effort into developing your intuition as well, with Saturn and Neptune in the ninth there, and having a spiritual basis for that you're working through. This could also have you publishing, for sure, or getting very, very serious about wanting to have a broad influence in terms of your worldview and your words and your expression. If you're a creative type, then your work as well. And what else is interesting about this is There's a bit of a contradictory kind of energy to both of these. Now, this won't necessarily happen for everyone, but Neptune, again, it can be a little bit confused. It can be a little bit foggy. And so this can have you feeling like, man, I don't know what to believe. I don't know who to believe. Who is a true ideological or political or religious role model and leader? Who is telling me the truth? What is the truth? That becomes really quite nebulous when we're dealing with Neptune in the ninth. Now, that requires that you, again, put in the effort, kind of to become that for yourself, to be able to evaluate any given situation in the world on your own terms and through your own eyes, and to not put too much credence into the views and opinions of those who style themselves as gurus or leaders or authorities on whatever given matter. So you do need to become that for yourself. And so if you're feeling like you don't know what or who to believe, that's really what that's asking for you to do there. Additionally, on the other hand, this can lend itself to really strong opinions about religion and philosophy. So you may encounter people like that who, this looks to me, Saturn in the ninth, in terms of dealing with another person, it can go in two pretty distinct directions. One is someone who really knows what they're talking about, who's great, who's solid, who's of integrity, and who's really going to just represent what they believe to be true quite straightforwardly. On the other hand, this can be someone claiming, especially with Neptune here, a kind of false authority and being really wrapped up in their own view of themselves as just knowing it all, and being kind of a know-it-all. So this could be something that you wind up encountering with regard to religion or philosophy or politics, geopolitics, society generally, so on and so forth. So you could be running into someone like that, especially if you are in university or something. You could run across both sides of this. A wonderful professor who really knows their stuff and wants to feed the dreams and the visions of students in a really wonderful way, but has that real authority, and also those who kind of power trip on that a bit. So on the other hand, though, you could also have these really strong opinions and views and be getting really serious about developing your own worldview and making sure that it is structurally sound. So this is, I think, an area of a great deal of focus for you starting next year and then building up year after year. For about 3 years, you'll have both of these here, and then Neptune will remain in this ninth until about 2039. So about 15 years or so there. So this is an area where when you start to feel a pull, it's for the long term. So don't be ashamed to invest too much into this area, because I think it's going to be an area of major focus for you coming up. Now, looking at Jupiter and Mars, Mars is going to go through a huge, big, dramatic ordeal of its retrograde cycle this year. It's already kind of started it. And Mars only goes retrograde every 2 years. And typically it'll run through about a sign a month. It'll go along at a pretty good clip. And then it just goes through this epically slow, long retrograde of about 3 months, or not 3 months, geez Louise, 8 months, where it starts to back up and then it goes and then finally goes forward. It is starting in Leo. It'll go back into Cancer and be in Cancer for a long time. And then it'll finally clear out around the early summertime. It'll finally clear out of the shadow. And by summer, then we're in the clear, and Mars is moving at a normal clip through other signs again. But because of the emphasis of this retrograde coming up this year, I do want to look at these areas where it could be causing some problems. The thing with Mars is that things can require a lot more energy and a lot more effort when Mars is there. And contrary to Saturn, which does tend to reward that, Mars can kind of be annoying just to be annoying for a little while. So that's something to keep in mind that is going to be arising. Now, what's nice about this alignment that we're dealing with next year is that, like I said, the biggest part of this Mars retrograde is going to be in Cancer. So it's going to be in your 12th house. And what's nice about that is that that wraps up, it moves on by about May. And in about the second week of June, we then finally get Jupiter moving into the sign that Mars was retrograde in. And Jupiter's going to clean the heck out of the mess. So we don't really need to worry too much about this, rather to just be very aware that the first half of the year is going to be pretty Mars focused. And for that reason, it's going to be slightly more annoying than the latter half of the year. So let's go into this. So with Mars in your 12th for almost the first half of the year, there can be issues, complications, conflicts, drama, even negative, weird experiences that you have with your subconscious, your psyche. This could even be fears of what is beyond the veil. So if you feel that coming up and you are not yet quite familiar with like psychic protection, spiritual protection, I would just look into that a little bit. Just try and practice it a bit. Give yourself a little bit of grace and comfort along those lines. Additionally, yes, impacting your spirituality, this can have you questioning to some extent that spirituality. And this is also then ahead of the Saturn and Neptune moving into your ninth transit. So this could even be setting you up for, okay, well, that was weird that my faith was shaken there for a moment. Let me start to find my way through this again. And then you wind up getting way into it and have that faith like really reaffirmed. Additionally, you could feel really lonely and isolated in that period of time. So if you feel that, try not to worry too much about that. It's a transit, it's there for a reason. And you could, though, feel with it being Mars, it's like it's kind of uncomfortable. There's an uncomfortable aspect of that isolation there. And so if you start to have like dark thoughts or whatnot, which can definitely arise with Mars in the 12th, I would reach out to people, try and see if you can maybe get out of your head a little bit in that kind of a scenario. But additionally, this will be impacting your intuition. And so again, this could be triggering it in a way that isn't completely correct. Like it could have you afraid of things that aren't really a problem. So I wouldn't worry, again, about that too much. The first half of the year, Mars is just going to be annoying there. Now then, again, in June, Jupiter moves into this house. Mars has already moved into the first, and we start to get that long, year-long transit of June 25 through June 26 of Jupiter in your 12th house, which is lovely to clean that out. So then we wind up with fortunate events that kind of happen beyond the veil that are setting you up for something. Things are falling into place, and yet you are, may not is an understatement. You're very likely not aware of the fact that things are lining up for Jupiter moving into your first house and some really overt, huge amount of awesome luck, things just like falling into your lap that you've been wanting for a while. This is great for if you are at all interested in manifestation or co-creation. This is wonderful for that. You're very likely to be having those things align with you. But again, you're probably not quite aware of it yet because this is in the 12th house. This is an area that we have a huge amount of difficulty accessing because it's just beyond the rising sign. So it's beyond our conscious awareness. And with this also being a very spiritual place, spiritual study and development is very likely with this Jupiter here as well. And of course, we'll have Saturn and Neptune up here in the ninth. This is doubling down on that and saying, yeah, go for it, do it, study it up, experience it up when it comes to spirituality and tapping into things beyond the veil, developing your intuition all along these lines. This is very protective when it comes to any sort of spiritual matters, any sort of energetic matters. So again, I wouldn't worry about whatever Mars may have had you being a little bit fearful of. Certainly by the second half of the year, no need to worry along those lines. Additionally, this can be a major improvement of your psyche. So, working through and improving upon subconscious patterning, conditioning, things like this that can affect our mental or emotional or even spiritual state. There's a lot of ease through which to improve along those lines. If it is within your reach to have a therapist around this period of time, that would also be really, really helpful in those sessions to offer really beneficial, great breakthroughs with a therapist. Additionally, then with Jupiter here, we could have you feeling really comfortable in isolation. So again, beginning of the year, maybe it feels uncomfortable, but then it's almost like it's setting you up to then fall into this in a very comfortable and productive way with Jupiter here, taking some time for yourself, really taking good care of your emotions and your mental state and clearing that out and really renewing and refreshing the mind and the emotion and the spirit. Additionally, again, similar to Saturn and Neptune being in the ninth, with Jupiter in the 12th, this can offer opportunities to engage with other cultures. And that could be with regard to their spirituality or language or just a way of being, their perspective on things that could be really mind opening and can broaden your horizons and your perspective in a really wonderful and beneficial way. And then, yeah, not to preview 26 too much, but then next year, we'll talk about it. You're going to get that first house Jupiter transit, which is really wonderful. Now, also with Mars then moving into your first house for a couple months, May, a little bit of June, we wind up with Mars in your first house. And so this can bring all of that Martian complication and conflict and things like this to your first house of self and your body, the way that people approach you, the way that you come off to people, and also your motivation. Now, Mars here is interesting. It's for sure a double-edged sword. This can increase your energy. This can have you more motivated. This can have you more like, screw it all, I'm going to do me. And if you have a problem with that, sounds like a you problem. But on the other hand, that can also have people being a little bit more aggro toward you as well. So just kind of something to keep in mind. If you're coming across that way, you can definitely invite more of that back toward you. But I wouldn't even go to just assuming that that has been the case. If someone is rude toward you or just kind of weird and demanding and maybe a little bit domineering even, it's the transit. It comes with the territory, and it won't go on for too terribly long. So I would be careful when it comes to injuries or illness around this time. I wouldn't overexert. That's one thing that can definitely be the case with a Mars first house transit, is that you have that extra energy and you're like, yeah, I'm going to do it. I'm going to go for it. And you wind up then tapping out your energy and putting yourself in a position where you might be more susceptible to getting sick or to injury. So with all of that said, let's talk about the eclipses that are coming up this year. So we have the nodal axis has just switched signs. The nodal axis always moves backwards, retrograde through the sky, compared to the planets, and then at an astronomically slow pace, also the stars move counterclockwise. The nodal axis always moves clockwise, so always retrograde, which is to say it just moved from Aries backward into Pisces, which gives us a new flavor and a new orientation to the eclipse seasons that wind up coming up for us. Now, the nodal axis, it is a mathematical point that floats around, which is based on the sun coming up to the northern hemisphere and down to the southern hemisphere throughout the year. The moon also does that throughout the month. And so where those two intersect and where they come together, there's an upper point and a lower point too, through which that winds up occurring. And so that is the north node, and that is the south node, is at that point where those two intersect. And that's what puts the earth and the moon and the sun in perfect alignment, such that the earth will get in the way of the sun's light to the moon, and we'll wind up with a lunar or a full moon eclipse, or getting a solar eclipse when the moon is in the way of the sun, because we're perfectly aligned. So that's what the nodal axis is. And the closer that an eclipse is to this nodal axis, the more eclipsed that something's going to be, the more total the eclipse, the closer it is. So what's interesting is we don't get a solar eclipse in Pisces, though. And so that means that in the spring, what we're actually getting is, because it's still very close to Aries, we're catching an Aries 9-degree solar eclipse, and that'll take place on March 29th. So to clarify that one first, just off the bat, this is going to be our last Aries eclipse for a while. And what this indicates in your chart is, with the ninth house, a further development of your worldview, your spiritual practice, and additionally study, teaching, writing, publishing, debate, discourse, travel, all of the things that I mentioned about the ninth house. Again, it can bring that into sharp relief, and it can bring it up as something that is very acute and presents itself in a very strong way in your life around the end of March here. And yeah, increased philosophical engagement as well. So what we have here is the nodal axis. It's running from Aries to Pisces simultaneous as Saturn and Neptune are moving into Aries. So they're actually crossing each other here. And I find that fascinating, because it helps us then to integrate both the fact that the North Node has just come through Aries in recent years, because then Saturn and Neptune can process a lot of that. And then the fact that Saturn and Neptune have been in Pisces for years, now the North Node is coming through to process that material. So this is coming up for you huge time in this coming year. And I, again, like I said, I wouldn't underestimate the extent to which spirituality and philosophy are going to kind of take over your life a bit in the coming years, if they haven't already. Now, otherwise, what we're dealing with is eclipses in Pisces and Virgo in the coming year, and that orients toward your second house of finances, resources, security, self-value, your own personal values, and your eighth house of other people's resources, joint resources, contracts, the matters which support other people and integrate them into your life, as well as power dynamics, intimacy, dependencies, things like this, psychological matters as well, especially around power dynamics. So what we could see with this is very financial, and it's very security based. So your own security versus that of others and so forth. That's what's going to be highlighted here. So we have significant investments or contracts coming up as a likelihood in the coming year and a half or so, but especially this upcoming year, and the development of greater trust of others. So with the North Node, there is a guidance toward this area, and a guidance away from an over-reliance on the South Node area. And so what this is indicating is that for personal growth, there does need to be a development of trust of other people. So you'll want to be, of course, careful about who you trust. But when you understand that you can, to then lean into that, to develop that, to become more connected, maybe to focus more on interdependency rather than independence or codependence or feeling dependent on someone or vice versa. So developing that in a healthy manner is something that you're called to do in the coming years, and will be presented with opportunities around those lines as well. Additionally, potentially less materialistic concerns. You do seem to be really developing spiritually around this period of time as well. So this makes a lot of sense, where with the South Node in the second house, it's orienting you a little bit away from those material concerns and more toward, again, kind of what's beyond the veil, what is more deeply significant to you on a soul level. Those connections, those learning experiences, things like this are just kind of more important for you. Delving into your own self, your own psyche, understanding yourself better is more important right now than focusing on money and material concerns, or to overemphasize that in your life. And yeah, so that feeding into a reorientation of your attitudes toward your individual security versus intimacy. So this is leading you more, again, toward that intimacy and working through dependencies. Like I said, interdependency, not so bad. Codependency, maybe not so healthy. Building or trying to get someone dependent on you, that's where you want to watch out. And if you have trust issues along those lines, that's probably something that you have personally experienced. And so this is asking you to try to work through that so that you can experience those kinds of intimate relationships without feeling like they have the power or control over you. So that is what the nodal axis is kind of doing in your life in the coming couple of years. And you'll feel some very sharp messages and be presented with some very specific opportunities along those lines in the spring and the autumn coming up, because those eclipses will be happening during Pisces and Virgo season, except for that one outlier of Aries that we're dealing with this year, which is, of course, just re-emphasizing philosophy for you. So that is what I have for you, Leo, for 2025. So with all of that said, I hope you have an absolutely beautiful year. And again, if you want to go into this in more detail, do feel free to book a personal reading. I would love to look into how all of these transits are playing out in your own individual chart. And again, if you don't mind hitting the thumbs up button, greatly, greatly, greatly appreciate that. And feel free to subscribe for future videos. I would love to have you here. And yeah, other than all of that, I again hope you have an absolutely beautiful year, and I will talk to you all soon. Be good. Bye.